we'll call the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee for December to order. We have one item on the consent agenda that was also on Finance Committee. Does the committee want to hear a report on that? All right. So if I could have a motion about consent agenda?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. We have 3 items on the general agenda. If we could have item number 1.
Item G1, resolution dedicating a bust in order of Councilmember Vivian H. Burke.
Evan, you're going to tell us about this?
Sure, I'll tell you just a bit.
Okay.
Good evening to the committee.
Good evening.
Chairman Light.
Thank you.
Councilmember Burke was, as you know, recently elected to serve her 10th consecutive term representing the citizens of the Northeast Ward. She is our longest serving council member, and the mayor approached us and felt that the time was appropriate to honor her record-setting and trailblazing service on the city council. And he suggested that we do it by creating a bust, or actually not creating it, but locating a bust here permanently in City Hall bearing her likeness. The full cost of the creation of this bust has been raised privately by friends and community leaders of Councilmember Burke's, and that is the item that you have before you. Can answer any questions if you have any.
Do we, by any chance, have a picture of the bust?
We do not have one for you,
Oh,
but I
okay.
can tell you that it's similar. If you've seen the bust of John Gold, former city manager, outside of our office, it's in that vein, similar size.
Thank
It
you.
was done by a local artist and then finished down in Seagrove Pottery.
Oh, very good, very good. Committee members, any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I think it's most commendable that we do this. It is appropriate. I don't think there will be another Dr. Vivian H. Burke, Mayor Pro Tem. I don't think any of us will make the 30, 40-year deal. I just don't think so. What it shows is the tenacity to serve. And right now in the world we live in, we don't see enough of that tenacity to serve and to volunteer and to be about the people. We just don't, you know. It's a few out there, but we don't. And I think this is good. This is a good thing for the city.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Just comment again, echoing, I think it's good. And I don't want to entangle this with my statement now with what we're looking at, but I would ask the city manager to particularly look at a few of our past council members who have served and seeing if we have done all we could do to recognize their time of service on council as well, but outside of this actual item, to make sure that as we pay homage to Curran and some of the others, that we've done the same for some others who've served.
Thank you. That's a great idea. May I have a motion?
Move for approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Item G2, resolution awarding commission for Centennial Art Piece.
Okay. Evan's got a show and tell on this one.
Oh,
What is it?
is that a body?
All right. So, as you know, in July of this year, the council authorized the commissioning of a Centennial art piece, and it was stipulated that this art piece would, among other things, honor the rich history of the city, the contributions of women, and be representative of the city's diversity. So you authorized an RFP We disseminated a call to artists that went out through a variety of channels to all the local universities and arts groups. And we received more than a dozen proposals in response to the RFP that we submitted. The group of proposals that we received were from local artists and art teams, a highly diverse group. And the submissions were reviewed by a group of highly regarded artists, actually representatives from each of the major universities here, Winston-Salem State, Salem College, and Wake Forest. And the selection committee decided to recommend to council the piece that you see before you here for the Centennial Art Commission. This piece was designed by a local artist with very strong ties to Winston-Salem State University. He's got an extensive record of art. His name is Van Dorn Hennett, and I'll tell you I'd like to tell you just a few details about what it is that you see here. So the piece is, if you can envision, it's about 8.5 feet tall, each of the towers. And I thought it'd be helpful. Now, I'm not going to attribute this to the artist.
Looks like E.T.
That's yours?
But this is a 5'9" person that's scaled to be, just so you can get a kind of a perspective of, at least height-wise, how your average person might appear up against this work. So I hope that gives you a pretty good perspective. Not width-wise, but at least height-wise, you'll see. So the committee was also charged with recommending a location for this piece. And if you'll remember, there were several possible locations that were outlined in the RFP. The committee has recommended that this piece be placed in Corporating Plaza, specifically up against kind of one of the walls, if you can envision, that frame the kind of the fountain there. Yes. So up against kind of one of those two panels. Jan Detter, I'll tell you, is a local artist. Jan is with us tonight. She kind of shepherded us through the selection process, and she or I are now open to any questions that you might have about the specifics of the piece.
Committee, any questions? I would like, Mr. Hennett is not here.
He is not.
Oh, okay, all right. I was hoping to meet him, but so these will be 8-foot-high pieces, and are they going to be silver, or are they going to be painted on the facets?
They will be fabricated in stainless steel.
Okay. And so all of the artwork or writing or whatever will be engraved in?
Yes, actually, this is a representation of what you will see. I think some of what is in the book is a representation of some of his other work.
Older work, yeah.
I think he submitted that as an inspiration for this. But this is pretty much what you'll see should you choose to approve it in Corporating Plaza. It'll be this representation.
And do I understand correctly that one is Winston and one is Salem?
Yes. The one to your left and my right is Winston. No, I think it is. And this one is Salem.
Okay. All right. Very good. Committee, other members? Yes.
I think it's going to be an interesting piece. 2 questions. I know, and I support art, and I support this commission. A couple questions that I know that I may or may not hear will come down to the dollar amount associated with the commission of this. Did we allocate this originally with what we could when we asked for this?
Yes, we did. We stipulated, the RFP that council approved stipulated $30,000 for the project.
Right. And so again, with that, I think we had discussion at that time even surrounding the dollar amount of the celebration and all that. And so again, I think we want to commemorate our city. And I'm sure people ask the questions about, how much it costs and those kind of things, but making sure that we know that we're getting the bang for our buck, and this is going to be something that hopefully will be there for generations to see as we move forward as a city and something that commemorates, as I'm looking here, that dual history that we have as a Twin City.
Councilmember Bessie.
Thank you. I assume this is coming in on budget.
Yes,
All right.
yes, $30,000 is
Very good.
what we have, yes.
All right. May I hear from, what is your pleasure?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
That's going to be exciting. When will it?
We're hoping that, that you'll see the unveiling of this piece hopefully no later than the fall of next year. We're hoping that it'll be fabricated and in place for a grand unveiling at somewhere late summer, early fall next year.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Item G3, ordinance amending chapters A and B of the Unified Development Ordinances to revise regulations pertaining to transmission towers, UDO 244, proposal of American Towers LLC and New Singular Wireless PCS LLC, recommended by the Planning Board.
Mr. Norby?
Thank you, Chairman Light, and good evening, council members. I'm going to go through a summary of the presentation, and I know that there are people here representing the petitioner, people interested in favor, and also people who have concerns about it, so I don't know whether the committee intends to hear from them, but I'll go through the basics of it first here. Of course, the petitioner in this case is American Towers and New Singular Wireless, and their request is to revise our existing transmission tower regulations. Sort of the background on this is that increased cell phone usage that has really kind of exploded in recent years, both in terms of the number of people using cell phones and also the data demands of cell towers or of cell phones, has strained the existing tower network. So what the providers are telling us is that more towers are needed in order to serve the same coverage area and keep the coverage where it needs to be. And that this need for improved coverage is greatest in residential areas. It used to be when cell phones first came into existence, people were using them as mobile phones when they were driving and along the major thoroughfares. But of course now people are using them in their homes, a lot of times multiple devices. And so that has been where the need for improved coverage is greatest. Our existing UDO does not allow transmission towers at all in single-family residential zoning, except in growth management areas 4 and 5. That's future growth and rural areas. So essentially that's mostly outside the city is where those have the possibilities of being located, but not within single-family residential zoning in growth management area 3, the suburban neighborhood. Let me show you this map here that we created to show you the area that I was just talking about on that last bullet. This is a map of the city, and the shaded areas, the darker shaded areas, are those areas zoned single-family residential in the city. So these, by your current ordinance, are unavailable for even asking for a cell tower to be located in there. So you can see some pretty broad areas and scattered around in all directions of the city there. Looking at cell tower regulations elsewhere around the state, there's a few communities that we thought we'd outline here. Cary, that you see listed at the top, allows cell towers in residential areas by right up to 199 feet with if they're located in the context of non-residential uses in residential zoning districts. It's allowed by right up to 150 feet for vacant residential lots or with residential uses. There's a Board of Adjustment special use permit that's required between 150 feet and 175 feet for vacant residential lots or residential uses. But if it's below 150 feet, it is by right in that area. It does require a council special use permit instead of a Board of Adjustment special use permit when it gets to between 175 and 199 feet for vacant residential lots or residential use. And it also requires a council-approved special use permit for a tower that is not a concealed tower. And I'll get to kind of defining what those are in a minute. I'll have an illustration for you. There is no requirement for what's called a stealth or a concealed tower, and non-concealed towers are only allowed in large lot residential. Now in Raleigh, very different situation. It allows cell towers in residential areas up to 250 feet high by right. And if it's above 250 feet all the way up to 510 feet, there's a Board of Adjustment special use permit required. There's no requirement in Raleigh for a stealth or concealed tower. In Durham, there is a board called the Development Review Board. This is mostly staff agency representatives that sit on this board, and they approve subdivisions and certain types of site plans. But it provides for Development Review Board approval of concealed towers, although there is a proposed ordinance under consideration that would require even concealed towers to get a special use permit. Also in Durham, under the current ordinance, a Board of Adjustment special use permit would be required for non-concealed towers. There is a height limit of 120 feet for large lot zoning districts and 25 feet above the maximum building height for other residential districts. There's no requirement for stealth or concealed towers there. In Greensboro, cell towers are allowed by right in residential districts, but only to the height limit of 80 feet. So, and a stealth tower or concealed tower is required if the tower is located within 1,500 feet of a residential use. It's only allowed in residential zoning districts with non-residential uses, and it's not allowed on vacant residential land. So a variety of different approaches among major jurisdictions in the state. Just some illustrations to kind of give you some examples of the types of towers that we talk about in these regulations. Is the one on the left is probably the most obtrusive looking. It's called the lattice tower. Those typically get the tallest, and you see all that structure that's involved in it. And when a tower gets above 200 feet, it has to have a strobe light on it. So it has that additional effect on what's around it there. The one in the middle is called a monopole, and that's just simply a pole that extends upwards. In this case, it showed 180 feet, and it typically has antenna equipment at the top and also maybe near the top of it. You see a lot of those around. And the ones that are a little bit newer, they haven't seen too many of those around, are called concealed towers, and that's a much more slender pole that typically goes up lower heights. In this particular example, it's showing 100 feet, but that's concealed, or sometimes it's called stealth towers. This is a kind of to illustrate the concealed towers. That's a typical one on the left where you have the pole that extends up. It's called a unipole, and then in some places they have taken that unipole and put fake pine branches on it, and that's the example you see on the right, which I guess is sometimes called a monopine. And they're generally under 150 feet tall. So I just wanted to get that terminology out there because the proposed ordinance does talk about those things. These are some monopole towers. Again, self-supporting, single pole. You've got the antenna up at the top or near the top. These are a couple of examples. And then the lattice tower that you see there, and that can have a bunch of different antenna near the top, typically because it is so tall it can carry a lot of different things. So the UDO 244 proposes a continuum of tower types beginning to the left with the concealed towers that are the least obtrusive, least impact on adjacent properties, but nonetheless they're sticking up there. And the idea is to allow those in most districts. Then the monopole is kind of in the middle, kind of medium range regulations, and then the greatest impact, those are the lattice, and those are only allowed in more intense non-residential zoning districts. In summary, the proposed ordinance tries to incentivize the shorter towers. And so to provide the incentive to do the shorter towers, the idea is to create an easier process for the providers to go through. And that in this case is proposed through a simpler approval process, such as a staff zoning permit review. The idea then for taller or more impactful towers would require a Board of Adjustment special use permit review, which would include adjoining property owner notification, sign posting, and a public hearing. And of course, that's a quasi-judicial process that doesn't allow any lobbying by anyone to the board members beforehand. They can only take sworn testimony at the hearing, and they can only make decisions based on findings of fact that are prescribed in the ordinance. Concerning the proposed residential standards, so getting into that part of the proposed ordinance, it proposes that only concealed or monopole towers would be allowed in residential zoning, which of course it's not allowed at all right now, but would be allowed under the proposal in residential zoning with a maximum height of 180 feet. Concealed towers that are under 150 feet, so just those concealed or stealth towers under 150 feet in residential zoning, would be allowed on lots with non-residential uses. So you have non-residential uses in zoning, residential zoning districts such as schools and churches and all that. Those would be allowed with a zoning permit from the zoning officer there. But if it gets up above 150 feet to 180 feet on lots with non-residential uses, it would require a special use permit from the Board of Adjustment. And then towers up to 180 feet are allowed, would be also allowed on vacant residential lots or lots that have a residential structure on it with a special use permit from the Board of Adjustment in growth management areas 3, that's the suburban neighborhoods growth management area 4 and 5. Some illustrations here to help explain these next couple of bullets. The towers adjacent to residential zoning would have a minimum setback of 100 feet, and the minimum setback on towers on vacant residential lots would have to be equal to the tower height. So if the tower is greater in height than 100 feet, then the setback would have to be the height of the actual tower. So you see a couple of illustrations here with a 180-foot tower on the left with a 180-foot setback there, and then a smaller tower of 100 feet with a 100-foot setback on the example to the right. The proposed non-residential standards, these are standards for non-residential zoning districts, is that the non-residential districts would allow tower types, all tower types, and increased tower height, except for the neighborhood office and the neighborhood business districts, which would continue to completely prohibit towers in them. Concealed towers would be allowed in all non-residential districts where towers are allowed with a zoning permit from the zoning officer. Maximum height would be 199 feet. Monopole towers would be allowed in most non-residential districts with a zoning permit. The IP district, institutional public, would require a special use permit, and the maximum height is 199 feet. Lattice towers would be allowed with a zoning permit in the very intense zoning districts such as HB, GB, and GI, with a maximum height of 300 feet. The lattice towers will require a special use permit in less intense non-residential districts such as PB, pedestrian business, limited office, institutional public, maximum height 300 feet. Currently, those towers in those districts currently only require a planning board review, and a planning board review is really only a site plan review. There's not really much discretion that is given to the planning board on that. If they meet the requirements under the ordinance, then the planning board has to approve them. In this case, then this would be switching this to a special use permit. In case you're curious, here's a map that shows the more intense zoning districts that I just had mentioned, where they are in the city, and you see them scattered around, particularly along the major transportation corridors and also in the industrial areas. This first went to public hearing at the planning board level in October, and at that hearing, the petitioners presented the draft ordinance. Well, actually, they had presented it to various community groups prior to submitting it in early September for planning board review. So they went around the community and talked to a number of different groups, such as the Neighborhood Alliance, the Winston-Salem Chamber, the Community Appearance Commission. Then they submitted it in September for planning board review. The public hearing was scheduled in October, and there was both support and opposition to the draft ordinance expressed. So after hearing that, the planning board continued the request for 1 month and asked the petitioners conduct more public information meetings and allow the chance for more public input on the ordinance. Between that time and the November public hearing, petitioner held 2 drop-in meetings on the ordinance, one on November 6th and one on November 7th. And the petitioners revised their ordinance language in response to comments heard at those meetings, as well as comments that came into the planning board office provided in writing. So the planning board then again considered the ordinance on November 14th. At that hearing, the applicant proposed the additional ordinance requirements that they had decided on after hearing that input. One change was having an additional setback of tower height plus 20 feet from any single-family residential structure. So they increased that setback there. They also added a provision that towers on vacant lots or lots with residential uses may only be located on lots that are 4 acres or larger. And that's because they had heard some concern that maybe these towers could be located within a subdivision, within a known development that had some lots that hadn't been built on yet. So what they wanted to do is make sure that there was a large acreage requirement for that. Another thing that they added to the ordinance was a requirement for a community meeting prior to the Board of Adjustment hearing for towers that require special use permit review, and towers in growth management areas 1 through 3 in residential zoning would also require a community meeting prior to the zoning officer approval. Now, that could be a little bit awkward because the zoning officer really wouldn't have any discretion to turn it down if they met the requirements, but nonetheless, they're proposing that there be a community outreach even before that. The notice of community meetings, another change, would be mailed to all property owners and neighborhood associations within 300 feet of the proposed tower site. The petitioner would have to do that. And that the current requirement for Board of Adjustment special use permits is only that the adjacent property owners get notice. So this would widen that out to 300 feet. The planning board heard these comments. They also heard concerns also at that hearing, and after discussion, the planning board did recommend approval of the revised ordinance at its November 14th meeting after making a minor amendment to further strengthen the residential buffer requirements in certain situations where a tower was located in a residential district. So that sort of summarizes both the process and sort of the structure of the ordinance. And again, as I said, there are folks representing the petitioner and supporters as well as people with concerns that are here, and I don't know whether the committee would want to.
I think the committee has said that this is not a public hearing, so, but I'll now recognize committee members with questions for Mr. Norby.
Yes, I have not seen anywhere in the material, Paul, a summary of our current rules on cell towers. Can you summarize under our current UDO in what districts they are allowed, whether there are any special references to their only being allowed, if it's a named use, whether there is for that district, whether there are circumstances under which a special use permit is required, and if so, by what body is it required to be reviewed?
Probably the easiest or the most concise thing is this chart that's in your packet there, or should be in your packet, that shows the different tower types, and then it shows for the different heights of those tower types what kind of an
What page
approval
is
process
that?
it goes through.
55.
Oh,
So that is the proposed. That gives you kind of a thumbnail of the proposed, and then there's another chart in there that looks more like this, and I'm sorry I don't have the book with me, but it's sort of a chart that shows all the residential zoning districts.
59.
And that gives you a column for what the existing ordinance allows and what the proposed ordinance would allow. So that would be the biggest change. There isn't that much change with the non-residential districts, but there is within your ordinance, if you can decipher that within the actual ordinance part of it, you have a little chart there that shows how the table permitted uses would change for those different non-residential zoning districts. But if you'd like, I can go through that chart that has the comparison of the residential standards there that I had just mentioned a minute ago.
I find that difficult to read and summarize. I'd be interested in a more concise summary, not
Okay.
necessarily on the fly here, but I'd like to see something prepared for us.
Okay. The biggest change, just to be very brief, is that the RS-15, the RS-12, the RS-9, the RS-7 district, and the RSQ district currently does not allow cell towers at all. And in the middle of that chart there, it shows under the proposed ordinance situations where if you're on residential zoning districts on sites with non-residential uses such as schools and churches, it would allow towers of a certain height with a certain approval process that is required for that.
Under what non-residential zoning categories are they allowed?
Currently, the cell towers are allowed in the, let's see, help me out. This is all proposed. It's allowed in LO, CPO, PB, LB, NSB. Right now, it is allowed with a planning board review, which I said has very little discretion for the planning board. It is also allowed in HB, GB, CB, the E district, LI, GI, CI, and with a Board of Adjustment use permit in the IP district.
And what standards are applied in the case of the BOA review of IP?
It would just be the typical, use permit review by the Board of Adjustment, so they would have to make the 4 findings that are called for in the ordinance after having a public hearing and sworn testimony on that.
May I interrupt here? Have I not heard that there is a move afoot somewhere that only experts can are allowed to give testimony for those conditions, especially for SUP?
For a special use permit, people would need to give testimony that is relevant to those four findings. And the four findings are that the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed and developed according to the application and plan, that the use meets all required conditions and specifications, that the use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting property, or that the use is a public necessity. And lastly, the location and character of the use, if developed according to the application and plan, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity and legacy. So the area I think that kind of calls into question who's a qualified expert is that third thing, the use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting property, or that the use is a public necessity. That's typically the thing that you want to have a qualified expert talking about that. But the others, I think there's no prohibition about it having to be a qualified expert to give testimony on those.
Except for the courts that have decided that you can't use some of them.
Well, maybe the city attorney want to ring in, but I think the only thing I'm aware of is that third one there, but I might be wrong.
Paul is correct. But with respect to that third item, particularly when you're talking about impact on the value of property and traffic conditions, normally that has to come from an expert.
But if I'm not mistaken, also the courts have ruled that you can't look at health problems. Is that correct?
Not sure exactly what you mean by health problem.
Well, that people who say that there could be health effects of cell towers.
Right.
Yeah, so, at any rate, I'm sorry I interrupted
That's right.
you.
No. Paul, I'm not sure if you'll remember this, but not too far back, within the last year or two, there was a request for rezoning of property that was not zoned residentially off of Vest Mill Road.
Yes.
And there were objections forming from some of the adjacent residential property, and the request was withdrawn, so we never heard it. But was that an S zone, and that was why it had to come forward?
Yes. In cases where the council has dealt with a cell tower, that is because there's been special use zoning, and that special use zoning may have excluded that as a use. And so, but normally the zoning district would allow it. So in that case, they were adding that use, showing a site plan where it was proposed. And I think they ended up deciding that they could find a co-location on a nearby tower.
And so a cell tower is identified as a use in our table of use.
Transmission tower, yes.
Yes, transmission tower. And if you have an S-zoned property in which that is not listed among the permitted uses, then you would have to come back in.
That's right.
And, okay. Thank you.
Who's next? Yeah.
Sir, do we have any concept of the number of properties that would qualify in GMA 3 as potential 4-acre sites that could have towers put on?
Councilmember McIntosh, I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head. We'd have to do a GIS analysis to see that. What we would do is we'd take those shaded areas that you saw there on that map and do another screening of what properties are 4 acres or greater. But if the committee would like that, we'd be glad to put that together.
Yeah. And what I've read that's called propagation mapping, where you co-locate towers and co-located antennae over population density that you had in one of your slides.
You mean showing where the tower locations
Yeah,
are
where the towers
and
are
their
in
radius
relation
of
to.
service? Yes. Now, we would have to rely on some information that is, I believe, on the web, right?
Yeah.
For the existing tower locations. And what I have heard is that there is some differences of opinion about how accurate that information is. But if that is, And if I'm understanding right, what you want to see is where are the existing towers
in relation to the
to those
density, the population density, housing density,
or
whatever.
would that work to have the towers in relation to that shaded area that shows the, where the towers are in relation to the areas that are residentially zoned there?
I think so. I think
It might be a little difficult to get, we would have to think some about how you get density there, but.
Yeah, I realize that, but yeah, that's certainly some of the master plans that other cities have gone through does in fact do that, to see where the gaps are, and not just where it might be the least expensive process to put it on a 4-acre lot in a residential area. So I think that would be useful to see. Is that where you were going with?
Yeah.
That's,
Madam Chairman, if I could just give one caveat, though, is I think what we could do would be a very kind of low-level mapping exercise. I think to go further to the degree that you were talking about with, for example, the Morrisville plan,
yeah.
that really required some technical expertise about cell tower technology that the staff doesn't have. And so in that case, they got an actual expert in that to do that technical analysis. But I'm not hearing that you're asking for that, but we can do this low-level mapping, understanding that that won't get you all the way to where you've seen in those other.
Well, perhaps our friends from, there they are, hi, from AT&T and the towers can tell us that. One other question, what the lower wavelength, lower megahertz, no, that's higher megahertz. See, that's, I need some understanding of that. I know Liz explained it to me, but it's already gone out of my head. So
That's probably where we're going to have to rely on some folks that know more about that.
Because I noticed that there are, in fact, looking at online at some of the descriptions of towers and or providers and what megahertz they have available. I mean, it's all over the place. So I need some understanding of that too, if possible. So, Ms. Adams, you have something?
I'm listening. I think you've just about covered it all, you and Dan. I think one of the major concerns of this committee and possibly the council is that there seems to be an insurmountable amount of information. And I think what we've done over the past couple of months, we've not made the information simpler at a level of understanding, not just for the council, but for the people at large. That's one of those things, I guess, like Councilmember Bessie. I'm a person, you can give me all of this, but at the end of the day, I just need to see the facts. I guess that's like a detective or police. I just need to see the facts. I need to see some type of side-by-side correlation of what has taken place in these other cities throughout North Carolina and how what we're trying to fashion or what we're trying to attain, and that may mean sending staff back to start to fashion something that's more that the council would like to see, or the committee. And right now, all I see is information. And I've read the information from the petitioners, I've read the emails, I've read everything online like Molly and probably Jeff. I've read the same, a lot of it's redundant. But it still doesn't get me where I need to be, Mr. Norby, as I said yesterday, to be able to make a definitive type decision on this issue. One, I'm wondering again, when we look at those other cities and the input they received from the citizens and the residents, how much have we heard, and you know, we say this all the time, We need some input from the people who are going to be affected by that, which is basically all of us. But I say those people that are leading the charge, they've done more research probably than all the rest of us have. And I think we need to hear from them on that level as to what their suggestions are. Now, I'm not saying that they got the whole 100%, of this issue of this UDO, but we definitely need to consider to try to make this as palatable and a somewhat of a win-win situation for everybody involved if we can, where we can agree on something. And right now, I don't think we're there. Am I missing something here? Somebody give me some nods or heads. Okay, all right.
I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one who's not fully comprehending everything here, and I thought maybe it was just the fact that I kind of come late to the party.
Nah.
But I don't feel like I've got really a summary of best practices. I'm not sure that there is a summary with the state of change of the technology industry and the demand, the demand going off the scale. So I'm just not comfortable that I understand how this works in other communities very well, where it doesn't work in communities. So I'm feeling uninformed.
It sounds like we need to hold on to this and get some more information to be able to make some sort of decision, to be able to understand all of the setbacks. I mean, I've heard in the last, in your presentation, some cities require a 1,500-foot buffer around residential areas. Some, I think it's Durham, is 450. There's that confusion about what would be best. There's the confusion, and after 8 years on the council, I still am not sure I understand what would require a special use permit rather than just a rezoning. To say, okay, this 4-acre lot is, let's just rezone it, go through the planning board and elected body process. I need some explanation of that too, in this case. Okay.
I'd be glad to give you a quick explanation now.
Okay, I'd love
that.
that.
Of course, right now, their only choice is to rezone it to some zoning district that the UDO currently allows a cell tower in. So you have to, if you're in a residential area, you'd have to zone it out of a single-family residential zoning district to some other non-residential zoning district. Mm-hmm. That can get to be a little problematic because depending on what kind of district is selected, you could have a spot zoning issue, which then becomes a legal problem there. So I think the idea of this is allow the possibility of towers in single-family residential districts, but put some requirements, some performance requirements on it, and also have a level of scrutiny or approval there. So whether the performance requirements are exactly where they need to be on this, or whether the level of scrutiny is where you think it needs to be. Those are probably the biggest questions in trying to gauge whether to allow these residential districts to be a possibility for someone to ask. This proposal gives a proposal for how to do that, but there are many ways that the council could end up determining that either what the standards are, the heights are, the setbacks are, the type of tower, or who approves it.
Yeah, well, and in fact, I think that's one of the things I have heard from my colleagues, and certainly my feeling, that these residential neighborhoods that we're talking about are, in fact, our constituents. They're our neighborhoods. And to allow the ZBA, a body that's not elected, to make that sort of decision is, I think, not something that most of us are going to be happy with. So I think that approval process is certainly going to have to, if it is in a residential neighborhood, have to include the planning board and city council. Yep. Dan?
I'm looking back at the current requirements for lattice towers. On page 42, there's some summary information in narrative form about the existing standards. And the last sentence under proposed ordinance compared to existing standards reads, lattice towers are not allowed at all under the proposed ordinance standards. It doesn't indicate where they are allowed, at least it doesn't in concise form, indicate where lattice towers are allowed under the existing standard.
Okay. I think what I've got here is something we can provide for you. Is we just put this together yesterday as sort of a little cheat sheet for me. It lists every single zoning district in the ordinance, and it says, is the proposal more or less restrictive than the existing ordinance? Yes or no? And then what are the notes there? So that may be helpful in kind of getting you to seeing for each and every zoning district what is different under the proposal. So that might be something that would get to your answer.
I'm sure that will be useful. It won't be comprehensive enough for my inquiry. For example, IP zones. We've got a lot of those scattered around in the middle of residential areas. I'm not sure whether the existing limitations on lattice towers are significant enough on lattice towers to discourage their location from areas where we wouldn't want them. I am interested in incentivizing the use of the concealed towers. But I'd like to see if we have gaps in our existing standards that permit uses to go through that we would be unpleasantly surprised to discover later. So just the issue of whether the proposed ordinance is stricter or less strict than what we have currently is not going to answer all the questions I have relevant to that use.
We could put together a table that has several of those key criteria, and it'll be a long table because we got 35 some odd zoning districts, but we can line that out for you and have several categories of information that you can see.
Thank you. Jeff?
To me, the challenge is to come up with something that we can essentially have as a fast-track process going forward that doesn't restrict their ability to do business and provide the cell tower service that we need. But I just think it's going to take some time and a lot more discussion to come up with that set of rules. It doesn't sound to me like we have a comfort level with the set of rules that are being proposed. But I think we need to get to that so that so that we remain competitive. And there's a competitive aspect to this that I'm very aware of. We can't lag behind because that affects a lot of things.
And certainly, just to your point, I know that some of the cities have instituted hierarchies of where cell towers are acceptable. And you have to look first to co-locate on one that's already there, then to have another one in a commercial area, and then on down the line till you get to no other choice but to rezone in a residential zoning. So I think that certainly would help clarify, and I think that's a good thought.
I think we've reached one of those milestones again in our community, whereas we create these plans, legacy plan, area plans, growth plans, but now we're at the crossroads like some other cities are seeing the road to technology. and an innovation. We have to look at this and embrace this just like we did for the tree ordinance and the sign ordinance and the no parking on the lines ordinance. It's going to be more than just a conversation, because we're somehow, with the input from our citizens and residents, we can embark on this together, and the petitioners, whereas we don't limit ourselves, as Councilmember McIntosh said, but we move forward as a team and as a group and as a city to attain what we need to do to get there all together. Again, that does not mean that we're all going to agree 100% on whatever it is that we land on, but it will be a piece of documentation or an ordinance that we can live with as a city that will not just be, as we said earlier today, for now. This has to take us a few years out as to where we want to be with the technology and the needs of our community for economic development communities in the next 3 to 5, 10 years. So,
Thank you. So it looks like we're going to hang on to this, Mr. City Manager and Paul. One other thing that I'd sort of like to be educated on in this the process of getting more data on this is one reads of other possibilities for co-location, not just on the towers. And I understand that the monopoles and all are limited in what they can hold, but that there are also possibilities of putting antennae on those electric line things.
Do that already.
That are big towers anyway, and are all over the place. And also the small cell technology that, I mean, it's supposed to be for dense areas, dense residential areas that needs more cell power. I don't know what I'm talking about. That would seem like it would be a useful technology to use. So, yes.
And I just have a comment. As we look at this issue, as I think I agree with many councilors that's already been stated, the fact of the matter is we're looking at our city and the demands of several different constituent groups. We have agencies and organizations that provide a service to our citizens, and then we have our individual citizens in the neighborhoods that they live in that want to make sure that their voices are heard and protected in the process. And as we continue to shift in the community with an increase of technology demands, we have to make sure that we stay at the forefront of what's necessary for citizens. I think it's no different from some of the conversation we had on yesterday in regards to internet service in some of those areas and affordability and how we make those connections, that we understand there's a demand for that, but the question is, how does Winston-Salem make the proper plan to make sure it happens? And I think Abraham Lincoln said it best in this quote where they said, if you give me 8 hours to cut down a tree, I'll take 6 to sharpen the axe. And I think that's what this committee is going to look to do. I think if the community would just bear with the committee in the process of doing that, I think we'll get to something that will work for everybody, because at the end of the day, we know it's a service that's needed, but it's how do we make sure that it meshes great with the fabric of our community.
Thank you. Very well said. Yes, Mr.
One thing else I might suggest is that we do some real life examples, take some aerials, some photos, and show you, propose what would happen, to kind of see in some real life locations if a tower went there, so you can. It's hard to visualize it when you're just looking at the drawing. So we'll come up with some of those as well.
In fact, balloon tests are one of the cities uses. So put a 200-foot tall balloon up in the air or whatever. So, okay, we're keeping this in committee. Thank you all for your interest. That's the last thing on our agenda.
I have one more comment or discussion. Mr. Garrity, how are we going to get, again, that's up to you and your staff, how do we get the citizen input as well as continue to get the petitioner's input, but somewhere we got to find a happy medium. And I don't think, I admire all of staff's subject matter expertise, but there's always the room for input. And I think it's very important that we have the input from both sides and that we listen to it.
Thank you. Uh-huh.
Yep, unless the petitioner agrees.
Yeah, yeah, and hopefully we will agree to work together to work this out, yeah, uh-huh. Okay, yes, sir.
And I've been trying to think of a path to suggest candidly, a negotiation between some of the neighborhood groups that have been expressing concerns most strongly and the petitioners with staff involvement. I don't have a ready proposal on that, but I also don't see any need to wait if staff between now and our January meeting can craft a concept on that.
Yeah.
It would be nice to have the issue areas of disagreement narrowed down for us if that can be assisted by preliminary conversations between petitioners and objectors sort of facilitated by staff. I'd love to see that.
Okay, thank you. That's very good. There's one item that I'd like to just bring to the attention of the committee. I have been approached by several people for us to follow Durham and Mecklenburg counties' resolutions urging the General Assembly and the governor to rethink their turning down of Medicaid. That obviously we are a city that's run in great part by the economic engine of the hospitals, and so I will send these along to you all to take a look at to see if, even though we don't have anything to do with healthcare as a city, really, we do, in fact. I mean, our retirees do have an interest in that, and hopefully we can also have some input from hospitals about the effect of that loss of Medicare. So I will keep this in the loop. Yeah.
Just a couple of comments. As always with an issue like that, I would like to see the connections to city services and direct city interests illuminated. And I personally am involved in putting together a project to advocate for the reversal of that decision. So I personally agree it's extremely important, and I'm working on it as a citizen. For me to be favorably disposed on a council resolution, as always, I need to see the connection to city services eliminated very strongly.
Thank you. And I'd be interested to hear what you're working on too.
So, sure.
Okay. Is there anything else we need to bring up? We're adjourned.